Hi, everyone. Really excited to be your host here for our webinar on scaling security efficiency with automation. Before I start, I want to mention to everyone that you can put any questions that you want to ask in our Q&A, and we'll get back to you with answers after the webinar. We want to be cognizant of time and go through everything. We promise to get back to you to your questions, and my email will be on the final slide so you can get it. Cool. A bit about myself before I dive in so you know who's talking to you. So some of you may know me already. My name is Sion Redskin. I lead our team, our channel enablement team for EMEA and APAC. I am a former pen tester. I've been a CISO 3 times, and I'm an author of a book called Hands-On Dark Web Analysis. Now, to set the scene for, say, this webinar, I would like all of you to look at this Cybertoon and try to think about all of the activities that you may be performing in your organizations in order to protect yourselves, right? There are all kinds of acronyms and names of controls and so on in the Cybertoon. And when you think about it, all of us, we buy and implement a lot of controls, a lot of tools, which are intended to protect ourselves, right, from all kinds of threats. But ultimately, like again, the Cybertoon, breaches, God forbid, but can happen. And what I would like you to do is, we're going to share a poll right now to ask you what you do in order to validate that these controls, that your security is working as it should. So if in a moment you'll see on your screen a poll. There we go. Thank you. I'll read it for everyone. So, are you confident in your cyber exposure and risk? That's the first question. The answers are, of course, as you can see, probably, hopefully, yup, very confident in our security posture. Second choice, for the most part, I feel confident that my organization is secure. I'm somewhat confident, but I have plans in place to do more. And not so much. There are more things I'd like to do. So please answer how you view your, or how confident you feel. Okay. And the results. Where's the drum roll when you need it? Only 5% chose, yup, very confident in our security posture. 26% chose, for the most part, I feel confident that my organization is secure. 58%, the vast majority, I would say here, I'm somewhat confident, but I have plans in place to do more. And 11% wrote or chose, not so much, there are more things I'd like to do. Thank you for your answers. And I could say that that is not very surprising. What you can see now is the same question, right? Look at those tools, those controls. You probably have most, if not all of them, in your respective organizations. I can tell you from personal experience, until I validated, until I stopped to check, to test if the firewalls and antiviruses and EDRs and IPSs and so on are really working, I wasn't sure. And the question is to all of us, Have we stopped to validate that the investments that we've made are truly working? Let's break it down. Let's look at some of the gaps that we have in how we approach validation, how we approach remediation of issues that we can find in different ways. So first of all, you have the visibility gap. Attackers look at organizations in a different way than what we, the defenders, usually do. They see, as you can see in this example here, they would see one circle and we would see something else. And what about the prioritization gap? From experience, the way that organizations usually prioritize remediation is based on two main factors: CVSS, or the severity of the vulnerability, and criticality of the asset where the vulnerability is found. Now that's all and good, and it is important to continue doing so, but attackers don't look at the network that way. They look for, and are probably all familiar with the term, low-hanging fruit. And what's lower hanging fruit than the low and medium severity vulnerabilities that most organizations never get to remediating, to treating, to dealing with, because we're focused on the critical and high ones up on the top. So attackers say, hey, the door's open there, let's go in. And a third gap or issue is the validation gap. To date, there are not many ways that you can validate if a vulnerability truly exists or not. A big challenge that we have is dealing or filtering out the results of, let's say, a vulnerability assessment, where we do get a very high percentage of false positives, for example. So filtering out all those is a challenge in itself, I should say. But understanding if the vulnerability really exists, and more importantly, what the impact of the vulnerability is on our organization, that's a huge challenge, one of the biggest. And don't get me started on the whole human factor, right? The biggest threat we face is ourselves. As this meme I like always makes me think about it, but it's not only those phishing emails. It's also the day-to-day activities that our users, that our employees are doing, which can introduce a new vulnerability or an old vulnerability, but simply expose it to be exploited and or validated if you do it beforehand. Exposure level is not a static thing. 10 years ago, let's say, we used to think that the organization was secure if we had a firewall, or maybe more than 10 years actually. And if we have various tools in place, we believed blindly that these protected us. They did to a certain level, until, of course, the attackers got better and found ways to circumvent these protection tools. So exposure level, totally dynamic over time. And what I would like you to do, what I would like to ask you to do, is look at this graph and write in the chat what you think those peaks could be. Just to give you an example or an idea of what to think about, what happens in our networks when new employees join? And as a result, of course, new workstations or laptops, access to organizational systems, and so on. That's one of those peaks. Think about this. Over time, exposure level changes. What could cause these changes? So happy to see your answers, your feedback in the chat. Anyone there? Okay, I won't force your hand. Aha, thank you, Ovidio. New cloud deployments, definitely one of the things. Let's expand that to, in general, new deployments of networks, of systems, of devices in the network, cloud environments, you name it. Think about mergers and acquisitions of companies, vulnerability disclosures. Yes, thank you, William, exactly. Network policy changes. Now, all of these things cause fluctuations in the number and type of assets that we have in our network, which in turn increases the attack surface, which means we have new vulnerabilities and exposures. So what do we usually do? We implement new security controls in order to protect the increasingly growing attack surface. But what we always need to remember as well is that the threat landscape is evolving much faster, usually, than the controls and protections that we can put in place. I see, yes, Ovidio, good example. Multi-cloud environments with misaligned policies, that's combining several use cases here, definitely. So that is what I mean by the exposure level is dynamic. Bingo, Rick. Yep, perfect. So you got it. That's what happens. And this is simply reality. This is what happens. It could happen almost on a daily basis, right? Think about R&D teams firing up new VMs or new systems on-prem, cloud, whatever. Think about IT wanting to implement a new tool, but testing it out previously in an environment and then moving from staging to production or to QA and production. All of these use cases reflect. Now, Rick, you touched upon something very interesting. I see you wrote, pen tests are good for about a minute after complete. Yes, exactly something. Keep that in mind, because what we're going to do now is our second poll, where are we going to, 14 years international. Yeah, you probably face those challenges. Hold that thought. We're going to talk about this right after the poll. So please, everyone, our next poll. Thank you. How are you validating your attack surface today? So the standards, the most common, I would say, ways are pen testing and red teaming. How other can validate, right? Not assess or simulate, just truly validate. You can do vulnerability assessments. You could do both or something else. I'm really interested in what the results will be. That's fine, Rick. It's all good. And okay, results are in. Pen testing and red teaming, 29%. That is the exact same as vulnerability assessments, same percent. So, neck to neck. 33% do both, which is very good. 10%, sorry, do other, which could be other things, of course, but that's very interesting that most of you, if it's both, of course, includes pen testing and red teaming. So what I want to talk about now is the following. Most of us, and the poll showed this, do either penetration testing, including red teaming for a moment as part of that. Others do vulnerability assessments, and some do both. I'm putting aside vulnerability assessment for a moment, which is something that's still important to do. It's becoming, as time goes on, as based on what we're seeing, more of a security operations or IT operations activity, continuously assessing and patching. But in order to find what, and remember the prioritization gap and validation gaps. So in order to find what's really impacting you, you need to truly validate. And that's what penetration testing can do. Sorry about that. Technical issue here, and I will reconnect. And there we go. Sorry for that. So as we said, penetration testing is basically the way to go, because if you truly want to find the real impact of a vulnerability, what it can lead an attacker, what it can allow an attacker to do. But there are challenges in the world of manual penetration testing, and none of them are the pen tester's fault, if you will. Right? It's more, I would say, on three main topics. One, penetration testing is resource dependent based on many resources. Think about the fact that it's a third-party project for many organizations. They have to manage this. The penetration testers themselves, like all people, we are not equal. Some pen testers have more experience and more knowledge than others. Some work in with specific toolset A and others with B. Now, as humans, and I'm saying this from experience, as human penetration testers, we usually work 9 to 5, 9 to 6, very rarely overnight, forget about weekends and holidays. And that means that we're missing out on part of the scope. Right? Part of what we see in the network, which pertains to the limited scope. Penetration testing is an expensive engagement, so it's an expensive project. Pen testers, they are pricey, I would say. So this means that organizations prepare sample hosts or sample part of their network, and that's where the penetration testers would focus, missing out. Again, this pertains also to limited scope. It's a snapshot in time. Rick wrote there that minutes after the pen test is over, it's not really valid anymore. Well, it's valid based on what was found, but there are probably new vulnerabilities, new weaknesses, new exposures which exist in the network and which we're simply not aware of. Basically, the challenge that penetration testers face is that it's a struggle to provide coverage for the entire organization for those reasons that I mentioned. It's hard to to fully validate the organization in a way that is truly protecting them because of these three. Now, let's imagine for a moment, use our hopefully interesting imaginations that we have. Security people have that kind of, usually have that type of mind. And imagine that you could benchmark your security posture with a click of a button, like click, wait for up to 1 day, let's say, and you would get a snapshot, an X-ray of where your security is at. What would you be able to do? Which use cases would you be able to implement? What measurements could you have? And this is, again, a question for you guys. Think about that kind of. I'd like to hear your insights, what you think you would be able to do with such a magical solution, let's say. And you're right, Ovidio, I see your challenge. That is definitely a big challenge. You need, some pen testers need to have specific regulated certifications and so on. So think about, definitely, thank you there. The M&A event is something that, think about this, with the click of a button, you measure the security, you benchmark the security posture for organization A, you benchmark the security posture of organization B, and then after the merge, or you can fix the issues before the merge, but after the merge, you would be able to find all the new issues that popped up naturally because of the merge, which IT and security usually find to be a very challenging engagement, to say the least. Anyone else? What about adding new systems? You want to check that when you introduce a new system into the network, it's not exposing you in some way or introducing new weaknesses and vulnerabilities. What about measuring, seeing how security vendors, let's say, measure up? Or I'll give you an example. Once we were on a POV, proof of value, with a prospect, and they had just purchased a new EDR system, which was implemented a few weeks before that. And the system integrator, the vendor, implemented it so according to best practices. But during the POV, Pantera was able to inject payloads onto 73 host devices in the network, completely circumvented that next gen EDR, and finding that although the EDR is top of the line, one of the best out there, if you don't configure it properly, if you don't tick the box, you're not really protecting yourself or implementing it properly. Love that example of video, using it as guidance for runtime protection to protect web apps. Right, validate them, attack the web apps in a safe manner. Think about that. And that way you can validate your security exposure. So with that in mind, think about this. Pen testing has actually become accessible with a single click, single button. So with that capability in place, with that in your tool set, think how you can leverage this to continuously, in an almost, in real time, basically, validate your security posture. And remember that graph with the fluctuation and exposure level? You'd be able to know without a doubt, of course, because you're really validating, you're really exploiting. Remember the manual pen testing, right? We're talking about pen testing at scale in an automated manner, which would allow you to always be with your finger on the pulse. So let me introduce you to a concept which some of you may be familiar with, those of you that aren't. So automated security validation. You can use it for a new deployment, benchmark your security posture, validate it. You have a new integration in place, perfect. Validate your security posture, benchmark it. You want to replace a security vendor or a specific security control. You want to check if POC the tool, see how it stands up to real world attacks, benchmark it by performing the automated security validation. So without further ado, let's jump over to the demo. Stop the share here and re-share the screen. So please bear with me a moment more. Okay. We are looking at the Pantera interface. You can see here that we have 3 operation modes: penetration testing or black box, what if or gray box, and targeted testing, which I like to call the red teamer's dream because you can perform specific use cases. For now, we're going to look at the black box demo. And here I can provide a username and name and a description for this scenario. Think about this as a template which you can reuse. I'm going to input the scope. Now, the idea here is that you can test your network at scale, thinking about not dozens or hundreds, which maybe a pen tester or pen testing team can cover, but truly covering your entire organizational estate in a matter of days as opposed to weeks or months. Security is paramount, or sorry, safety is paramount for us. So you would be able to exclude, of course, systems that you don't want the platform to validate. You can configure or define duration, how long you want this to happen. Remember, downsides of or challenges of manual penetration testing? Fine, run it over the weekend, overnight, over the holiday. Get the results to your email and have scheduling in place in order to automate this whole process. I'm creating and running this. Sorry for that. And I will jump to a running scenario to be cognizant of time. Okay. The focus of this webinar is automation. And what I would like to show you here is the results of this automated validation. What you can see here is a scenario which has run for almost 2 hours and has garnered or reached 123 achievements. An achievement in Pentera is the result of a successful attack action. Let's review one or two here, and then we'll wrap up the webinar and, of course, address all your questions via email. By the way, those boxes that popped up, those are those achievements in real time. So if you think about how a manual pen test looks, actually watching a black screen, scripting going on, with Pentera, with automated security validation, you would see in real time what's happening. Okay, I picked one of the achievements, and what I see is what we call the attack vector, the graphical representation of the kill chain. Now, by integration that we have with SIM platforms natively through the UI, where you can integrate to all of them out there, any SIM basically, you would be able to get all the results where the SOC team will be able to analyze them and validate. Okay, Pentera did this. Pentera was able to upload a file to a website. Have we detected this? Did we block this? Over time, with this automation and with these integrations that Pentera has with various parts of the security stack, you would be able to continuously improve and make sure that your exposure level is acceptable and managed. Okay, so without, I can continue for hours. Some of you know this about me. Pentera is something, or automated security validation in general, is a topic that is very close to my heart, and more than happy to share information. If anyone wants, of course, a demo, stuff like that, please feel free to reach out to us. And we will, there you go. Thank you for that. Feel free to click the link that you have in the chat, and you will be able to get this. Okay, shifting back to the other presentation, because I promised email. And you can either go to our website, you'll see the information there, or you can see my email on the presentation on the slide on your screen. Feel free to reach out. More than happy to answer questions and help you understand how you can validate your security posture. Thank you for joining us, everyone.